Now, I personally like moral complexity in my game. I like ethical questions. I like situations where characters have to wrestle with hard choices. I like seeing how players roleplay their characters when there is no perfect answer. That is part of what makes the game meaningful to me, right? If the day were to ever come when they told me, Josh, you're not allowed to run moral complexity in your games. This is too divisive. That's the day I'm going to stop playing D&D, okay? And I'm going to do something else. A significant part of what makes the game meaningful to me. Hello friends, welcome back to GM Philosophy. I'm the GM Philosopher, and this is the channel where we empower game masters to run better games. I am a full-time pro D&D game master. I'm also a full-time pro TTRPG YouTuber. I've been running games for over 24 years, and I'm super happy that you are here, my friends. Today I want to talk about something that came up in one of my games recently, and I want to be very careful with how I talk about this because this is not a video about blaming anyone. This is not a video about saying that one of my players were wrong or another was right or anything like this. This is a video about something that happens in tabletop role-playing games all the time, actually. Character conflict, player feelings, and the challenge of making sure that in-character tension does not quietly turn into above-table resentment. This is what I want to talk about in today's episode, okay? So this is very important. Drop me a comment. Let me know if you ever experience character conflict and how you deal with it in your games. I'd love to hear it. So let me tell you first a story. Earlier this week, I had a player reach out to me because some things had happened in-game between their character and another character. From their point of view, their character would realistically be frustrated. Their character might be annoyed. Their character might even begin to act with more withdrawn, guarded, or like angry behavior toward the other character. And I want to be very clear. This is not automatically bad role play by any stretch of the imagination, right? Sometimes if characters are being played honestly, they're going to have friction. They're going to disagree about things. They're going to misunderstand each other. They're going to make choices that bother each other. That can be a part of the drama of the game, and it is not at all a bad thing, okay? But the player reached out because they wanted to touch base and work through it, and I think that was a good instinct. So instead of just letting it quietly build, I decided to call for an above-table conversation with the group so that we could talk about it openly. Okay, now for me personally, these kinds of things usually feel pretty manageable. When I'm a player, I'm very comfortable saying something like, hey, just so you know, that what my character is about to do is because they feel a certain kind of way. This is in no way a reflection of me as a player. And then I proceed to do the thing that might cause friction in the game, trying to separate my character from myself, right? In the moment, in the actual moment. This is how I, kind of like put that separation in there and laugh it off and then role play the difficult scene to try to make sure that I curate good relationships above table, even if relationships in the game are sketchy, right? Now, some players get anxious when character conflict starts to happen. And it's really important to understand that not every player is comfortable with this. Some players worry that if their character acts frustrated or angry, then another player might take it personally. Some players worry that the game master might get upset with them. Some players just do not like the feeling of conflict at the table, even if everybody says it's just in character. And I think game masters need to take this seriously because character on character hostility can create real feelings. It can create tension. It can create insecurity. It can make people wonder, is this actually just roleplay or is there something else going on here? This is one of the big reasons many tables ban PvP, okay? And honestly, I understand why. In my current pro games, I have prohibited PvP, which is player versus player behavior, because I did not want individual players to feel bullied, cornered, or ganged up on in the game. In a professional game especially, I think you have to be very careful about anything that could make a player feel like the table has turned against them. And here's the complicated part. Banning PvP does not remove party conflict. I think a lot of GMs think it does, but it doesn't. It just changes the form that the conflict takes, okay? If characters are not allowed to attack each other, threaten each other, or solve problems through direct conflict, then some of those tensions may become social, emotional, passive-aggressive, or prolonged instead. That does not mean banning PvP is wrong. But it does mean we should not pretend that banning PvP magically solves all the human feelings at the table, because it doesn't. Sometimes it slows conflict down. Sometimes that is good. Sometimes that gives the GM more time to notice what is happening and intervene before things explode. But sometimes it can also drag tension out because the characters do not have a clear in world way to force a resolution. Now, for the record, I'm not completely sold on the idea that banning PvP is always the right move. In most of my years running games, I allowed player versus player combat. And most of the time, it was not a disaster. In my friends and family games, it often became a part of the story. Characters fought, argued, clashed, learned from it, and then the party grew stronger afterward. But that was a different context. A friends and family game has a different social foundation than a pro game. By the way, if you want to hear how I started my pro game adventure and went from having 0 pro games and only the dream of being a pro game master to actually realizing it and building a sustainable, first a side hustle income, then a full-time income with it, you can grab my book, the Pro GM Guidebook, links in the description. Now, full disclosure, my business is not just pro games. I run 5 pro games right now, and then I also run the YouTube and I sell products like this book. So you could easily take this method and fill up many games. Like right now, I am very, very comfortable with the idea that I could fill 10 games, 15 games if I wanted to. I choose to build my business on YouTube and selling products also because those scale better economically. But I'm just saying, if you want to learn the tips, tricks, strategies, techniques that helped me to go to full-time paid game master, you can grab this book. Link is in the description. If you want to get serious about making either side or full-time income with your pro game mastering business, then that is the book for you. Okay. Now, with that being said, in a friend group, people often have more reasons outside the game to work things out. There's already an existing relationship. There is more social glue. In a pro game, however, a player may not have that same connection. If the table starts to feel hostile, they may simply think, these people are not for me, and leave, right? So I understand why pro GMs are careful with PvP. I understand why I was careful with it in the beginning, okay? But I'm also learning through these games that banning PvP does not automatically prevent negative feelings. And it does not automatically prevent bullying. If someone is actually bullying people at the table, the solution is not really about PvP rules. The solution is dealing with the bullying behavior itself. Now, to be very clear, I do not think that this recent situation was bullying in any way. I think this was a much more ordinary and much more human thing than that. What I genuinely think happened here is that the 2 players were both trying to buy into the same story, but their characters were very different. And I think the players' personalities actually lended to a bit of in-game friction. And maybe there's also a bit of natural, like just human personality difference here. I really think that this is the case. Okay, and this is going to happen. And that does not make either of the players bad. Some people just naturally create more friction with each other. That is life. If you've ever worked anywhere with any humans, you know this is true. If you grew up with siblings, you probably know that this is true. That is life. That is not unique to D&D. That happens in the workplace, friend groups, families, creative teams, and every other human environment. Some people have a high threshold for social friction. Some people have a very low threshold for it. Some people are much more direct in their communication styles. Some people are more sensitive to tone than others. Some people role play in a way that is sharper or more confrontational. Some people are more cautious and peacekeeping. And none of that automatically makes anyone wrong. But here's what the game master needs to understand. It means that the game master needs to understand that these dynamics do exist. And in this case, we had an above table conversation, and I think that was the right first step. Did that conversation solve everything permanently? Probably not. And that is also okay. Let me explain that. Not every above table conversation is going to end with a perfect solution tied up in a little bow. Sometimes the point is just to get the tension out in the open. Okay. Sometimes the point is to let people say what they are feeling. Sometimes the point is to make sure everybody understands, okay, this is a character dynamic, but we need to be mindful of how it lands above the table. And honestly, that alone can diffuse a lot of the tension, okay? One thing I strongly believe is that tension gets worse when nobody is willing to name it or face it or call it out or talk about it. A lot of people are afraid to call out tension. They think calling it out will make things worse. And yes, sometimes calling it out can be very uncomfortable in the short term, but avoiding tension usually does not make it disappear. I am a firm believer in this. It just lets it grow in the dark. And I personally believe that this is almost always a bad thing to do, okay? As game masters, we need to get better at saying, hey, I'm noticing some tension here. Let's pause for a second and make sure we're all good above table. That does not need to be dramatic. It does not need to be accusatory. It does not need to be a trial where somebody is declared guilty. It can be very calm, and it should be calm, kind, simple, and professional. It can be something like, hey, I want to pause for a second. Now, this is a great dramatic scene. I really love everyone's role play here. In fact, everyone get heroic inspiration for this. But I want to make sure everyone is okay above table, right? We are still having fun with the tension. I'm having fun with it. That's what I think is going on. But I want to make sure, do we need to adjust anything? Is everyone feeling okay? Like, is there anyone who's feeling a certain kind of way above table about this, right? This little pause can save you a lot of trouble. And I think that this is one of the biggest lessons here. The goal is not to create a table where nobody ever has friction. That's not realistic. The goal is to create a table where people are allowed to be honest when friction shows up. In a perfect world, every player would always assume the best. Everyone would always know the difference between character feelings and player feelings. Everyone would always communicate perfectly. Everyone would always put party cohesion first. But that is not how humans work, as you've probably realized. Humans are complicated. We avoid discomfort. We misread each other. We hold things in. We worry about being judged. We sometimes feel things before we fully understand why we feel them, which is an actual crazy thing to try to understand. And this can make our feelings very complicated, right? But it's real. It's the real experience a lot of humans have, okay? A lot of times we do not fully understand our feelings at first. And then we might even act on them without fully understanding them. This is a very common thing that happens. And D&D can bring that out even more because D&D is not just a board game. It is a collaborative storytelling experience with moral decisions, emotional stakes, character identity, group dynamics, and social pressure all happening at the same time. So if you run games with real drama, real choices, real moral tension, you should expect some complicated feelings to show up eventually. In fact, it might be true that this is a sign that you're doing a good job because it means people actually care about the game. I wrote a whole book about this, The Advanced Art of TTRPG Mastery, how to create player buy-in and emotional resonance through meaningful, deep role play, and how to actually create that with your characters or with your player characters. If you want to run the kind of games where you can actually make your player characters care about the experience and understand how that dynamic works, this is the book for you. I compiled this 50-page ebook. You can buy it for about the price of a cup of coffee. Links in the description, and that's what this whole book is about. I wrote it based on my 24 years of experience running games, and it's just really, I'm actually very proud of it because it talks a lot about that. If you want to learn how to do it, grab it. But if you are creating real emotions at your table, this is a good thing. This means you're actually doing a good job, okay? And maybe more importantly, it does not mean you're doing something wrong. It means you're playing a human game with other humans. It means you're all playing a human game with humans together, okay? Now, I personally like moral complexity in my game. I like ethical questions. I like situations where characters have to wrestle with hard choices. I like seeing how players role play their characters when there is no perfect answer. That is part of what makes the game meaningful to me, right? If the day were to ever come when they told me, Josh, you're not allowed to run moral complexity in your games. This is too divisive. That's the day I'm going to stop playing D&D, okay? And I'm going to do something else. And that's a significant part of what makes the game meaningful to me. But if I'm going to run games like that, then I also have to accept responsibility for helping the table navigate the feelings that come with it. And that might mean being willing to listen when players feel a certain kind of way. That might mean being willing to pause the game and talk about it above table. That means not automatically villainizing a player just because their character creates conflict. And it also means not ignoring a player who says, hey, this is starting to feel weird to me. This all matters, right? You can respect the player who wants to role play realistic character frustration. You can also respect the player who feels uncomfortable with where that frustration might lead. These are not mutually exclusive. A GM's job is not always to decide who is right and who is wrong. Sometimes the GM's job is to help everyone understand what is actually happening. Is this character conflict? Is it player conflict? Is this a communication issue? Is this a safety issue? Is this just two roleplay styles bumping into each other? Is there bullying going on? You cannot know that unless you are willing to talk about it. So here's my practical advice for this, okay? First of all, make your PvP policy clear before the campaign starts. If PvP is banned, define what that means. Does it only mean no attacking each other? Does it also mean no stealing, no intimidation, no hostile spells, no hurting each other's favorite NPCs, no sabotage, no betrayal? Because if you do not define it, players will define it differently, okay? Second, when character tensions start to rise, pause and check in before it turns into resentment. This could save you a lot of trouble. You do not have to stop every argument, but if the energy starts to feel uncertain, take 30 seconds or so and ask if everyone above the table is cool, right? This is actually very genuinely good and it can be very helpful. Third, do not shame players for having character conflict. Character conflict can be great. It can be dramatic. It can create some of the best role play in the campaign. The problem is not character conflict. The problem is unmanaged character conflict that starts turning into real above table emotional conflict. Fourth, do not expect party cohesion to happen automatically. Encourage it, reward it, build scenarios where the characters need each other, give them shared goals, shared enemies, shared mysteries, shared victories, and reasons to trust each other. And remind them that party cohesion is the goal all the time. Remind them twice or 3 times a session. Remind them that party cohesion is not just a rule. It is something that you want to cultivate at the table. And they'll probably agree with you, but it's amazing how this does not always come naturally to immersive role players, okay? So you got to keep reiterating it. Fifth, be willing to call out tension with kindness, not with accusation, not with panic, right? Just honesty. Be like, hey, I think there might be some tension here. Would you be okay with talking about this above table for a second? That's a very powerful GM tool. In this situation for my game, I'm glad the player reached out to me. I'm glad we talked. I'm glad the group was willing to put the issue on the table. I don't think anyone here was the villain. I think this was just a normal human moment in a complex role-playing game, and it reminded me about this, and it made me want to make this video because I try to document my experience in my games, in my videos, trying to provide real-time value to all of you. I think that honestly, these moments are part of the experience and the craft. If you're going to run games that matter, if you're going to run games with moral tension, emotional stakes, strong personalities, and meaningful choices, then eventually you're going to have situations where you're going to have to help people navigate difficult feelings. This is not separate from game mastering. This is part of the job. So my message to game masters is really this. Do not be afraid of character conflict, but do not be careless with it either. Create clear expectations, watch the emotional temperature of the table, pause when you need to, talk above table when things get murky, and remember that most of the time the goal is not to prove who is wrong. The goal is to keep the table healthy enough for the story to continue. Drop a comment. Let me know what you think about this. Do you allow PvP in your games? Do you ban it completely? Do you allow it only after an above table check-in? Do you think moral tension and party conflict makes D&D better, or do they create more trouble than they are worth? I would love to hear what you think about this. I'm the GM Philosopher. Empowering game masters to run better games is the goal. Roll some D100s for me at your next game, friends, and I will see you on the next one.